We're very lucky to be joined by our next guest here. Former, now CF Montreal, but was Impact at the time, former national team player and current Apple TV analyst, Patrice Bernier joins the show. And Patrice, before we bring you in here, I want to say congratulations on the Wall of Fame induction happening later today.
Oh, thanks guys. It's going to be a special day. Probably the last time as a player, if you could say officially, and then stamped within the history of the Impact / now CF Montreal.
So you've been around this club for a very long time, obviously as a player. Now you're following them as an analyst. How impressed have you been with how the team has kind of taken shape this year after a rough start?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. Everybody had a bit of question marks what's going to happen because they had a record season last year in terms of club standard. New coach, new faces, lost some talent that were sold, meaning that they did have a lot of success. Took some time, but the last 2 weeks, I think you see the players gelling a bit more. There's been a lot of injuries. Players not yet fine-tuned with to execute the ideals of what Losada wanted. But the last 2 games I've seen breathe of life, and that it's promising. And I will see if tonight they're able to keep on that path, because they played 2 teams that were not doing as well as them. Now they're playing a team that's doing quite well traveling, which is Orlando, which is the best team in the East in terms of winning away from home.
What stage is the CF Montreal club at right now? Are they in a rebuilding phase, or are they still trying their best to win?
I think now the motto of the club since the new sports director arrived in 2019 has been to try to invest in young players, get players internally throughout the league. Like we had Kamal Miller, Alistair Johnson, now Bryce Duke, and some young players coming from the academy, and perform and be competitive and hopefully make the playoffs. But it's knowing that now they were going to work differently, maybe not spend on the DJ Drogba or Nacho Piattis, and try to develop in this new age, which is younger players. So you could say they're a bit in transition, because not only that they lost prominent talent, but they did lose a coach who was there for 2 years, who had set a very specific identity of way of playing. And now you have a new one who's trying to ingrain his own ideas. So definitely going to have to be in transition if they sell players 1 or 2 or 3 a year, as they had last year. But we all know you get sold, teams usually have a lot more players, eyeballs on their players when you have success. So they do have to maintain being playoff team and being one of the prominent teams in this league.
You speak about young players there. I mean, right away, names that come to mind are Sean Rea, Jonathan Sirwa now in goal, both CPL alumni. And then Chouanier, I feel like, is coming out of his shell a bit more this season. We're seeing what he can do and produce on the field. Kind of speak on those guys and how well you feel like they've adjusted to the MLS level.
Yeah, all 3. I was at the academy, so once I retired, I went into coaching, and so I was with the academy for a spell. And I saw these guys, young players. You see the potential, but also as a former pro, I realized that once you get to the pro level, it's another ball game, because you can be good against players your own age or a bit older than you, but now you're playing against men, guys who have a lot of experience. For Jonathan Sirwa and Sean Rea, you could see that the fact that they went to CPL helped to forge more experience, getting minutes that they probably wouldn't have had if they would have just stayed with the pro team here in Montreal. And now they're getting in. Jonathan Sirwa, you can see the calm, the assurance that he gives, the confidence to the defense and to himself, and to Hernan Losada, who probably didn't know who he was before this season. And Sean Rea is slowly getting out of his shell, having scored against Vaughan in the Canadian Championship. So they're slowly growing. Mathieu Chouanier is another story, because he didn't benefit from going on loan. He was with the first team. He didn't play his 2 first years or 3 first years. And now, since when Wilfried Nancy took over, he had 2 years of playing 1,400, 1,500 minutes. And now you're seeing him coming out of your shell, as you mentioned, and being an important player in the starting 11 and probably the best player so far since the beginning of the season.
Yeah, it's been really impressive to watch. In conversation with CF Montreal and former national team player Patrice Bernier. Patrice, you mentioned the coach, and Losado comes in, and it's been a bit of an adjustment period. How impressed have you been with his ability to take this roster, whatever shape it was in, and turn it into now 3 consecutive victories on the run right now?
Yeah, look, not easy for the coach and coming in, especially they just had a record year, finished second in the East. Coach who was beloved by the people here in Montreal. And you have to be able to, and you have a style that's not necessarily exactly the same. So he had a lot of injuries, a lot of experience, or if you could say players from the past 2 years who were used to a certain style. So you're trying to implement your ideas with players who have been breeded with an identity that they attach themselves to. So it was difficult. And then you're not winning. 5 losses on the road. That's very difficult, and you're probably in the hot seat right away after a few weeks on the job. But he stayed true to his ideas. The management went to get out Bryce Duke and Ariel Lassiter because they needed some offensive sparks. And now we're seeing those ideas a bit more. The intentions of play are clearer, and the players seem to have more cohesion and in sync with each other. It's the same lineup being played 2 or 3 games in a row. Well, with all these injuries to Lassie Laplaine and Samuel Piet, Romel Kyoto, starters were that the coach couldn't really count on at the beginning of the season. So hats off to him because he had to dodge some bullets, if you could say, in terms of the coach because the results weren't there at the beginning. And now for him to maintain. But they do have a lot of tough games coming up because they have a full schedule in terms of May. But they're also playing home games, which we all know in MLS is a deal breaker because you usually win 3 or 4 games on the road, but you win most of your games at home. And now they have a stretch of games here at Stade Saputo that they have to go and take those points and climb the ladder.
Yeah, completely agree, Patrice. And like you said, consistency in lineup is such a big deal, and I think that's a lot. That's what a lot of Montreal struggles have been in the past. And with this young lineup, you hope that they can find a way to be consistent. They just need that one piece of experience to come in. Hopefully, Kyoto comes in soon. I want to transition just quickly. It's a big day today for yourself, being inducted into the Wall of Fame. For myself, I'm getting a puppy, but no bigger than for Canada Soccer. They have a lot of decisions to make today. I'm just wondering how much of an insight do you have, and how much of a I want to say presence do you have in the national team in terms of sending out that letter to Canada Soccer and then to the provincial bodies? Do you have a say in any of that? Have you helped them with your experience to kind of guide them?
No, the only person that had contact at the beginning is John Herdman and his staff, because Mauro Biello is from Montreal also, so they came over to Montreal. So I had a few chats when John Herdman was on the job in terms of the men's national team side. So got to chat with him and see how he was, because I just retired, and he wanted a bit of some insight on, some of the older players, I guess, that I had played with, and also I had a chance to see Alfonso blossom into the player he is. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the national team, the CSA, no, not necessarily. We see that as much as there was a big high in terms of what the women have done, what the men have done recently, the money that's going to be poured in, but we realized that we were in a spat of a scandal, or if you could say, distrust between the men and the women's players with the program, and that's going to have to be regained, and to be able to explore, because we are in a great period for Canada Soccer. The men's team is performing, went to a World Cup, going to the 2026 World Cup, probably going to Copa America. Loads of young talents that are in top clubs. The women's team is going to the World Cup. We have Christine Sinclair, who's considered one of the best in the world, in the history. So this is a perfect time for us to be blossoming in terms of the game here at home on soil. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. and a direction that needs to be set, because the men's national team and the women's national team are results. But if we want to maintain that, it's what the grassroots will be able to establish for the years. The youth national teams, they're suffering right now because they have no budget. U.S. national team is training a year or two in advance before World Cup qualifiers, while some of these teams, girls or men, are just going to the tournament a few days in advance. So if we want prominent talent for the next decades, we need to invest into the youth department and make sure that they get the international exposure, they get the international experience, and then when they make it to the pros or to the A-team, that they're ready and that their talent is on the par as everybody starting at the youth level. So hopefully, now I know Jason DeVos is there in interim for former players, but my door is always open if we need to chat. I love the game, and definitely we want to see Canada grow, and not just in great results, but in all the aspects of the game, from the grassroots to the youth national teams to the men's and the women's national team having success for years to come. If I look at our neighbors, USA, they've been prominent now for the last decade or more.
Speaking to Patrice Bernier on TSN 1050. Patrice, we're talking about the Canadian men's national team there, and one of the stars at that World Cup for the national team, or a player that stood out, was Kamal Miller. He was playing with Montreal, and then this trade happens. I'd love to get your opinion on what your thought on the trade was. I'm sure Twitter and a lot of CF Montreal fans were kind of questioning it because he was such a mainstay for CF Montreal. But then you bring in Bryce Duke and Lassiter from Miami. What are your thoughts on the move?
Kamal, when he arrived here from the get-go in 2021, he proved that he was a top performer, player that considered one of the better defenders in this league. With his international status, it confirmed it. Now the reality is he came, and everybody knows now these players, when they come to CF Montreal, they understand that they're in a platform and a club that now sells players. So they know if they do well with the CF Montreal, they probably will become the next Georgi Mihailovic, Alistair Johnson, Ismail Kone. And after the World Cup, it's big highs. And when you come back I haven't been to World Cup, but when you come back from big highs as a professional, things change. Your perspective may change. And as you come in, maybe he expected to be sold after the World Cup. That may have played in terms of his, okay, I might not be here right in January. I might be sold. It didn't happen. Why isn't it happening? There's all these questions. And then it plays into also your performances because it's also psychologically. And now the club was probably looking to try to sell him, but the performance weren't there. And the biggest assets the CF Montreal had were Mel Kyoto and Kamal Miller. Those are players that anybody talks about in the league, there's going to be interest. So if Montreal wanted to better a portion of their play, which was the offensive part, they maybe needed to sacrifice a good part that they probably thought they would sell. And knowing that they still have Joel Waterman, they have Rudy Camacho, they just invested in George Campbell, they got Corbo. So they felt they probably could make this move, and knowing that it wouldn't hurt the back line. Even though Kamal is a great defender and one of the better ones, they felt he had better needs somewhere else, and they maybe needed to sacrifice Kamal and maybe also allow him to go somewhere else, have a fresher start, and regain the confidence in the performance that will probably allow him to move on to the next level. Because we know Kamal is a great player, international, and he has ambitions to move to the next level also. So maybe going to Miami will help him get to where he wants to go. And for Montreal, they definitely needed some offensive parts, and they needed to sacrifice a pawn, which Kamal Miller was. And that's the name of the business sometimes. You see yourself maybe longer, but bad situations change things quickly.
Can Montreal fans expect to see more roster changes, specifically in that June transfer window?
I wouldn't expect. I think now a lot of the guys are coming back from injury. So Romel Kyoto is coming back. Samuel Piet is still a few weeks back. Lassi Lappalainen. So Olivier Renard is probably, and the coach are probably saying, look, I didn't even have these guys for several weeks. Now I do. So, and I'm able to have some good results right now. So imagine if these guys are coming back But I'm pretty sure they'll be looking to, do we need to add in one piece? So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the summer. I don't think there'll be loads of pieces that will be moving unless players like Choinière, Bryce Dukes score and then somebody is really willing to come and take them this summer. But they're going to be looking at where they really need to fine-tune things. And there's players like Romel Kyoto whose contract's ending at the end of the season. Will they re-sign him? And not maybe you want to get a return for your investment before the player runs his contract at the end of this year.
Patrice, no question for me. Just wanted to say, just because we're talking about Kamal and you and I have a small connection. I'm also a Syracuse alum, and I remember watching you play in Montreal when I was in Syracuse, especially in that 2016 Eastern Conference against TFC. So just a pleasure to have you on. Pleasure to be able to speak with you, and I was always incredibly impressed by the way you controlled the game when you were at your highest peak of your career.
Thanks, appreciate it. Yeah, of course, Syracuse, as you know, the president of CF Montreal is a Syracuse alumni also. We played together, and it was a great school, learned a lot of things, great place, the quad. And but our career ended in 2016. Unfortunately, it was a great series versus TFC, but we were on the end that wasn't necessarily the way I wanted to end it. But it was fantastic, and tonight I'll have the chance to be recognized in terms of one of those players who went a little bit further in the history of the club as Impact and now CF Montreal.
Patrice, as we wrap this up just quickly, and as you get inducted into the Wall of Fame tonight, favorite memory playing for the club?
Favorite memory, 2015 series versus Toronto, scoring that goal. I spent the year on the bench. I was captain, and then we played our first playoffs at home, got the score at home, and then I got to assist Didier Drogba. So I could always say that I passed the ball to one of the legends of the game in the world.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Patrice, really appreciate you taking some time this morning. Enjoy the match tonight. Enjoy the induction. We'll be watching here from Footy First.
Thanks. Appreciate guys for the time. And anytime we can share some more soccer talk.
Absolutely.